The electric fence hummed to life at 3:47 a.m., and Martha knew they'd finally crossed the line. For 6 months, the Willowbrook HOA had been circling her 200-acre ranch like vultures, claiming her grandfather's land was somehow community property. Tonight, 3 board members lay unconscious in her pasture, twitching from 10,000 volts of pure justice. As sirens wailed in the distance and her phone buzzed with death threats, Martha smiled grimly. They wanted a war over her family's legacy now. They'd gotten one that would shake this wealthy suburb to its very foundation. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday that would change everything. Martha Callahan stood on her wraparound porch, the morning sun casting long shadows across the rolling pastures that had belonged to her family for 3 generations. At 62, she'd weathered drought, disease, and developers, but nothing had prepared her for the words printed on the legal document trembling in her weathered hands. Notice of eminent domain proceedings, community land reclamation. What the hell, she muttered, her voice carrying across the empty field where her prize Angus cattle grazed peacefully, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. The letter was signed by Patricia Westbrook, president of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association, the same woman who'd moved into the mansion development that had sprouted like a cancer along Martha's eastern border 5 years ago. The same woman who'd complained about the unsightly farm structures and the odorous livestock disrupting the aesthetic integrity of their premier residential community. Martha's hands clenched the paper so hard her knuckles went white. The legal jargon was deliberately confusing, but the message was crystal clear. The HOA was claiming her ranch fell under their jurisdiction and demanding she surrender 150 acres for community green space and recreational facilities. "Over my dead body," she whispered. Her phone rang, jarring her from the shock. The caller ID showed her lawyer's number. "Robert, please tell me this is some kind of sick joke," she said without preamble. "I'm afraid not, Martha." Robert Chen's voice was tight with anger. "I've been going over the documents they filed. They are claiming that when the Willowbrook development was approved, the county accidentally included your property in their master deed restrictions. They say it makes your ranch subject to HOA oversight. That's impossible. My family's owned this land since 1952. We were here decades before those McMansions." "I know, but they've got some very expensive lawyers making very creative arguments. They are saying the original surveyor made an error, and that error gives them legal standing to claim community interest in your property." Martha sank into her grandfather's old rocking chair, the same one where he'd taught her to read when she was 5 years old. "What does that mean, exactly?" "They want you to deed over 150 acres to the HOA for $1. In exchange, you can keep the remaining 50 acres, but you'll have to comply with all their restrictions: no livestock, no agricultural structures, house must be repainted in approved colors, landscaping subject to their approval. They want to turn my ranch into a golf course." That's exactly what they want. The documents mention plans for an 18-hole championship course, clubhouse, and luxury condos. Martha felt something dangerous stir in her chest, the same fire that had driven her grandfather to fight off railroad companies trying to steal his land, the same stubbornness that had kept her family's ranch alive through 2 recessions and a farm crisis that had broken her neighbors. "How long do I have?" They are demanding a response in 30 days. After that, they are threatening to file for immediate seizure citing community welfare emergency provisions. Emergency provisions? What emergency? They claim your agricultural activities pose environmental and health risks to the community. Something about groundwater contamination and livestock diseases. Martha laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My wells test cleaner than their fancy swimming pools, and my cattle are healthier than their pampered poodles." "Martha, I have to ask, do you have the resources to fight this? These people have deep pockets and political connections. The mayor's wife sits on their architectural review board." She looked out at her land, the oak grove where her grandmother was buried, the creek where she'd caught her first fish, the barn her father had built with his own hands. Every acre held memories, every fence post was soaked with 3 generations of sweat and dreams. "I'll find the resources," she said quietly. "This is my home, Robert. My family's legacy. I won't let some suburban princesses steal it because they want a prettier view from their kitchen windows. After hanging up, Martha walked to her grandfather's gun cabinet and pulled out the Remington 870 he'd carried during his own land disputes. The weight felt right in her hands, solid, dependable, final. Her neighbor, Tom Brennan, pulled up the gravel drive in his pickup, dust cloud trailing behind him. At 75, Tom was the only other old-timer left in what had once been a thriving agricultural community. His weathered face was grim as he climbed out of the truck. "Heard about your trouble," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "Patricia Westbrook's been asking questions about my property too. They coming after you next?" "Already started. Got a letter from their environmental compliance committee demanding I remove my chicken coop because it's a nuisance structure. Been raising chickens on this land for 40 years. Martha studied her old friend's face. "What are you going to do?" Tom was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the pastures. "My wife's been pushing me to sell anyway. Move into one of those senior communities in town. Says we are too old for all this work. But this is my home too, Martha. And I don't like bullies." They sat in comfortable silence, two survivors of a dying way of life, watching Martha's cattle move lazily across the green pasture. In the distance, the red tile roofs of Willowbrook glinted in the afternoon sun like scales on a sleeping dragon. "You know what really galls me?" Martha finally said. "They moved here because they wanted the rural charm of living near working farms. Now they want to destroy everything that made this place special." "Money changes people," Tom said. "Makes them think they can buy anything, including other people's lives." That evening, Martha drove into town for a meeting with her insurance agent, hoping to explore options for legal coverage. The Willowbrook Community Center was hosting their monthly board meeting, and the parking lot was packed with luxury SUVs and German sedans. On impulse, she parked across the street and walked to the window of the meeting room. Patricia Westbrook stood at the front of the room, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her designer suit immaculate. She was addressing about 30 residents, all of them nodding along as she gestured toward a large presentation screen showing aerial photographs of Martha's ranch. "As you can see," Patricia was saying, "this property represents a unique opportunity for our community. Once we acquire the land through the reclamation process, we'll have control over 150 acres of prime real estate adjacent to our development." A man in a polo shirt raised his hand. "What about the current owner? Is she willing to sell?" Patricia's smile was cold as winter. "The current occupant has been presented with a very generous offer. If she chooses not to cooperate, we'll proceed through legal channels. The county has already confirmed that the original deed restrictions include her property." "Is that even legal?" asked a woman near the back. "Our legal team has reviewed all the documentation thoroughly. The surveyor's error that occurred during the original development approval gives us standing to claim community interest. It's quite common in situations where old agricultural properties are surrounded by newer developments." Martha's hands clenched into fists. The surveyor's error was no accident, she was certain of that now. This had been planned from the beginning. "What's the timeline?" someone else asked. "We expect to take possession within 60 days. The architectural committee has already approved preliminary designs for the golf course and club facilities. Property values should increase by at least 15% once the project is complete." A murmur of approval swept through the room. These people weren't just stealing her land, they were treating it like a business transaction, calculating their profits while destroying her life. Martha turned away before she did something she'd regret. But as she walked back to her truck, she heard Patricia's voice one more time, drifting through the open window. "Ladies and gentlemen, within 2 months, that eyesore of a cattle ranch will be transformed into the crown jewel of our community. The Callahan problem will finally be solved." The Callahan problem? Martha sat in her truck for a full 5 minutes, hands shaking with rage. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed Robert's number. "It's me," she said when he answered. "I want you to file an injunction against the HOA. Tie this up in court for as long as possible." "Martha, that could get expensive fast. We are talking about months, maybe years of litigation. Then we'll fight for months or years." But Robert, I want you to know, if the legal system fails me, I'm prepared to defend my property by any means necessary. What does that mean? Martha looked out at her ranch, then at the lights of Willowbrook glittering in the distance like the eyes of predators. It means they picked the wrong family to mess with. 3 days later, the phone started ringing at dawn. Martha rolled out of bed, her body protesting after a sleepless night spent patrolling her property line with the shotgun. The caller ID showed Robert Chen's number. "They've escalated," he said without preamble. "Sheriff's department called me an hour ago. The HOA filed a complaint claiming you threatened county employees with a firearm. Those weren't county employees. They were private surveyors trespassing on my land. The county issued them permits, Martha. Technically, they had authorization. Technically, this is still my property until a court says otherwise." Robert's sigh crackled through the phone. "The sheriff wants to talk to you. Voluntarily, for now. But Martha, if you keep pulling guns on people, they'll arrest you. Then you'll be fighting this case from a jail cell." Martha walked to her kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, and froze. A white van was parked on the county road, just outside her property line. 2 men sat inside, watching her house through binoculars. "They are watching me," she said. "What?" "Right now." White van on the road. 2 men with binoculars. "Martha, don't do anything rash. I'm coming out there." But Martha was already reaching for her grandfather's rifle. The bastards wanted to intimidate her. Time to return the favor. She walked out onto her front porch, the Winchester .30-06 cradled in her arms, and waved at the van. The men quickly lowered their binoculars, but didn't leave. Martha sat down in her grandfather's rocking chair and began cleaning the rifle with deliberate, visible motions. After 10 minutes, the van drove away. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Tom Brennan. "Martha, you need to see this." His voice was tight with anger. "What now?" "They've got crews working on my property. Claims adjusters, environmental inspectors, the whole 9 yards. They are documenting every chicken dropping like it's evidence in a murder trial." "On what authority?" "County Health Department. Seems the HOA filed a complaint about potential bird flu contamination. Now they are treating my farm like a biohazard zone." Martha's grip tightened on the rifle. "They are doing the same thing to both of us. Creating a paper trail to justify seizure. That's what I'm thinking. But Martha, there's something else. I saw Patricia Westbrook here yesterday, talking to the inspectors. Real cozy conversation. She was on your property. Bold as brass. Acting like she already owned the place. When I confronted her, she said she was monitoring community health concerns as HOA president." Martha's mind raced. Patricia wasn't just filing complaints, she was orchestrating them. This was a coordinated campaign designed to overwhelm them with bureaucracy and legal fees until they had no choice but to surrender. "Tom, we need to meet. Tonight. Somewhere they can't watch us. The old grain elevator behind Murphy's store. 9 o'clock. After hanging up, Martha spent the day reinforcing her defenses. She moved her cattle to the pastures farthest from the Willowbrook development and set up motion-activated trail cameras along her property line. If they were documenting her every move, she'd return the favor. At 8:30, she drove her pickup along back roads to Murphy's abandoned general store. The grain elevator loomed against the twilight sky like a concrete monument to better times. Tom was already waiting, his weathered face grim in the fading light. "They hit me with 3 more violations today," he said. "Improper waste disposal, unlicensed agricultural structures, and aesthetic non-compliance with community standards." Community standards? You're not even in the development. Apparently, the community impact zone extends to any property visible from Willowbrook. They want me to tear down my barn because it detracts from the pastoral ambience. Martha laughed bitterly. They want the pastoral ambience without the actual farming. All the charm, none of the reality. It gets worse. The county's threatening to condemn my property if I don't comply within 30 days. Force me into emergency sale proceedings. To who? 3 guesses. They stood in the shadow of the grain elevator, 2 old warriors watching their world disappear one violation at a time. But Martha felt something stirring, not despair, but the cold fury her grandfather had carried when the railroad companies tried to run their tracks through his best pasture. Tom, what if we fight back? We are fighting back. Got lawyers, filed appeals, no. Really fight back. Make it cost them more than they are willing to pay. Tom studied her face in the dim light. What are you thinking? Patricia Westbrook thinks she can wage a war of attrition. Bleed us dry with legal fees and bureaucratic harassment until we give up. What if we made it personal for her? Martha, if you're talking about what I think you're talking about, I'm not talking about hurting anyone. I'm talking about making them understand that actions have consequences. That we are not just obstacles to their golf course, we're people with nothing left to lose. Tom was quiet for a long moment. What did you have in mind? Martha pulled out her phone and showed him the photos from her trail cameras. They've been documenting our every move. Time to start documenting theirs. The photos showed Patricia Westbrook and 2 men in expensive suits walking Martha's property line, pointing and taking measurements. The timestamp showed they'd been there at 6 a.m. before Martha was awake to stop them. They are trespassing to gather evidence for their case, Tom said. Exactly. And if they are willing to break the law to get what they want, maybe it's time we stopped playing by rules they are already ignoring. They spent the next hour planning. Tom would use his connections with other displaced farmers to gather intelligence on the HOA's activities. Martha would document every violation of her property rights and every suspicious action by board members. They'd create their own paper trail, but this one would expose the truth instead of hiding it. As they prepared to leave, headlights swept across the grain elevator. A black SUV pulled into the lot, and 2 men in suits climbed out. Martha recognized one of them from the property line photos. Mrs. Callahan. The taller man approached with a confident smile. I'm David Morrison, legal counsel for Willowbrook HOA. This is James Patterson from County Planning. We'd like to discuss a resolution to your current situation. At 9 p.m. In an abandoned parking lot. Martha kept her hand near the pistol in her jacket pocket. Seems like an odd place for legal consultations. We understand you're meeting with other affected property owners. We thought this might be a good opportunity to address everyone's concerns at once. Tom stepped forward. Our concerns are simple, boys. Stay off our property and stop trying to steal our land. Morrison's smile never wavered. Mr. Brennan. No one's trying to steal anything. The county has legitimate environmental and safety concerns that need to be addressed. We are simply trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Who's everyone? Martha asked. Because it seems like your solution involves us losing our homes while your HOA gets a golf course. Patterson finally spoke up. Mrs. Callahan, you have to understand the bigger picture. This area is developing rapidly. Property values are increasing, but that requires maintaining certain standards. Your agricultural operations are incompatible with a modern residential community. My agricultural operations were here 50 years before your community existed. Times change, Morrison said. The county has the authority to reclassify land use when it serves the greater good. You can fight this and spend everything you have on legal fees, or you can accept our generous compensation offer and relocate somewhere more suitable for farming. How generous? Tom asked. $50,000 for your property, Mr. Brennan. $200,000 for yours, Mrs. Callahan. Martha nearly choked. My ranch is worth at least $2 million. Not with all the environmental violations and legal restrictions we'll be implementing. By the time this process is complete, your property will be essentially worthless to anyone except the county, and we are only interested in it for community benefit. The threat was clear: cooperate or watch them destroy the value of their land. Through bureaucratic harassment. Martha felt the cold fire in her chest flare into an inferno. Gentlemen, she said quietly, I think this meeting is over. Mrs. Callahan, please consider our offer carefully. The alternative could be very unpleasant for everyone involved. Is that a threat, Mr. Morrison? It's a reality. The county has broad powers when public welfare is at stake. Environmental emergencies, health hazards, safety violations, there are many ways a situation can become complicated. Tom moved closer to Martha, his hand visible on his own sidearm. I think you boys better head back to your fancy offices. Now. Morrison raised his hands peacefully. No need for hostility. We are all reasonable people here. Just think about what we've discussed. As the SUV disappeared into the night, Martha and Tom stood in the darkness, processing what had just happened. They followed us here, Tom said. Been watching our every move. And they just showed their hand. This isn't about environmental concerns or community welfare. It's about money and power, pure and simple. What do we do now? Martha looked up at the stars, remembering nights when her grandfather had taught her to navigate by constellations. He'd always said that when you're lost in the dark, you follow the North Star, it never moves, never lies, never changes. Now, we make them understand that we are not lost farmers they can bully into submission. We are the North Star in this fight, we are. The war began at 3 in the morning. Martha sat in her darkened kitchen, nursing black coffee and watching the security monitors she'd installed around her property. For 2 weeks since Tom's evacuation, the HOA had maintained constant pressure, code enforcement officers appearing daily, surveyors testing her boundaries, environmental inspectors taking soil samples from her pastures. But tonight was different. 3 figures dressed in black were cutting through her north fence, moving toward her cattle with what looked like tranquilizer equipment. Martha's blood turned to ice. If they drugged her cattle and claimed disease contamination, they could seize her entire herd under emergency health protocols. It would be Tom's chickens all over again, but on a scale that would financially destroy her. She grabbed the night vision scope from her grandfather's hunting rifle and confirmed her worst suspicions. One of the figures was Patricia Westbrook herself, directing 2 men who were setting up what appeared to be injection equipment near her prize bull, Thunder. You want to play dirty? Martha whispered to the darkness. Let's play dirty. She moved through her house like a ghost, gathering equipment she'd prepared for exactly this moment. Military surplus night vision goggles, a gift from her nephew who'd served in Afghanistan. Her grandfather's suppressed .22 rifle for silent work. And the piece de resistance, a modified cattle prod that delivered enough voltage to drop a groan. Man without permanent damage. Martha slipped out her back door and began stalking the intruders through her own pasture, using every trick her grandfather had taught her about moving unseen in familiar terrain. The 3 figures were so focused on their criminal veterinary work that they never noticed death approaching through the tall grass. She got within 10 feet of the nearest man before he heard the whisper of grass against her boots. He started to turn, syringe in hand, but Martha's cattle prod caught him in the ribs. 10,000 volts dropped him like a sack of grain, his body convulsing as the electricity coursed through him. The second man spun around, reaching for something in his jacket, but Martha was already moving. The suppressed .22 coughed twice, and .22 caliber rounds shattered both his kneecaps. He went down screaming, his cries echoing across the pasture. Patricia Westbrook froze, her perfect composure finally cracking as she found herself alone in a dark field with an armed woman who just demonstrated she was willing to use lethal force. Mrs. Westbrook, Martha said conversationally, stepping into a shaft of moonlight so Patricia could see her clearly. Out for a midnight stroll? You're insane, Patricia gasped. You just shot 2 men. I defended my property against intruders who were in the process of destroying my livestock. In Texas, that's not just legal, it's expected. Martha picked up the syringe the first man had dropped, holding it up to the moonlight. What's in here, Patricia? Something that would make my cattle sick. Something that would justify an emergency seizure order. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Martha pulled out her phone and began taking photos of Patricia, the tranquilizer equipment, and the 2 men writhing on the ground. Because it looks to me like the president of Willowbrook HOA was caught red-handed trying to poison cattle to manufacture evidence for a fraudulent health emergency. Patricia's face went white as she realized the implications. You can't prove anything. Can't I? Martha gestured to the small cameras she'd mounted throughout her pasture. Smile for the security footage, Patricia. This is all being recorded. In beautiful high-definition color. The second man was still moaning, clutching his shattered knees. Martha knelt beside him and went through his pockets, finding a wallet with County Health Department credentials. Dr. James Sullivan, she read aloud. Licensed veterinarian employed by County Animal Control. Seems like this conspiracy goes deeper than just the HOA. Please, Patricia whispered. We can work something out. The compensation offer, we can increase it. Martha stood, the rifle still trained on Patricia's center mass. The time for negotiations ended when you decided to poison my animals. Now you're going to learn what happens when you declare war on a Callahan. What do you want? I want you to call off your dogs. I want the HOA to withdraw its claim on my property. And I want you to leave me the hell alone. I can't do that. There are contracts, legal obligations. Martha fired a round into the ground inches from Patricia's feet. The HOA president jumped back, terror replacing calculation in her eyes. Wrong answer, Martha said. Let me explain your situation. Patricia. Right now, you're trespassing on my property with criminal intent. You've brought drugs to poison livestock, which is a felony in Texas. You've conspired with county officials to manufacture false evidence, which is corruption of public office. And you've been caught on camera doing all of this. Patricia's composure finally shattered completely. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that you picked the wrong woman to mess with. I want you to know that every dirty trick you've tried to pull on me is about to be turned back on you. With interest. Martha pulled out zip tie restraints and began securing the three intruders. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to spend the rest of the night in my barn, thinking about your life choices. In the morning, I'm going to call Sheriff Anderson, not one of his deputies, but the sheriff himself. And you're going to confess to everything. I won't do it. Oh, but you will. Because if you don't, these photos and videos go to every news station in the state. Wealthy HOA president caught poisoning farmers' cattle. How do you think that will play with your neighbors? Your country club friends? Your husband's law practice? Martha dragged the three intruders to her barn, where she'd prepared a makeshift holding cell in one of the empty stalls. She zip-tied their hands and feet, then settled into a chair with a rifle across her knees. Comfortable? She asked pleasantly. Good. We've got about 4 hours until sunrise. Plenty of time to discuss your future cooperation. Over the next few hours, Martha systematically broke down their conspiracy. Patricia, faced with irrefutable evidence and the prospect of criminal charges, began talking. The surveyor's error hadn't been an accident. The HOA had bribed the original surveyor to include Martha's property in their deed restrictions. County officials had been paid to fast-track environmental violations. Dr. Sullivan had been falsifying health reports. On demand. How many other properties have you stolen this way? Martha demanded. 12, Patricia whispered. Over the past 3 years. Small farms, elderly owners who couldn't afford to fight. And the money? How much profit? 60 million in property value increases. The golf course development alone will be worth 200 million when complete. Martha felt sick. This wasn't just theft, it was systematic destruction of an entire way of life, all for the sake of property values and resort amenities. At dawn, she called Sheriff Anderson directly. Within an hour, the sheriff himself arrived with a full investigative team. Martha handed over the security footage, the photographs, and the detailed confessions she'd extracted during the night. Mrs. Callahan, Sheriff Anderson said, studying the evidence, this is going to blow up into the biggest corruption scandal this county has ever seen. Good, Martha replied. Maybe it will prevent them from destroying any more families. But as she watched the sheriff's deputies arrest Patricia and her accomplices, Martha knew the real war was just beginning. The HOA had resources, connections, and political influence that wouldn't disappear with one scandal. They'd regroup, find new angles of attack, and come back harder than before. That afternoon, her phone began ringing. First, it was Robert Chen, with news that the HOA's legal claim had been temporarily suspended pending the criminal investigation. Then it was reporters wanting to interview the rancher who fought back. Finally, it was other farmers, people from 3 counties away, who'd heard about her victory and wanted to know how they could defend their own properties. But the call that changed everything came just before sunset. "Mrs. Callahan. This is Margaret Foster. I'm a reporter with the Austin American-Statesman. I've been investigating HOA land seizures across Texas, and your case has broken the whole thing wide open." "What do you mean?" "Patricia Westbrook wasn't working alone. We found evidence of a statewide network of HOAs using the same tactics you uncovered. Fraudulent surveyor reports, bribed officials, manufactured health emergencies. It's been going on for years." Martha sank into her grandfather's rocking chair, suddenly exhausted. "How many victims?" "At least 200 families that we know of. Probably more. But Mrs. Callahan, your evidence is going to bring down the entire conspiracy. You've just become the most important witness in the largest property fraud investigation in Texas history." After hanging up, Martha walked out to her pasture where Thunder was grazing peacefully, unaware that he'd almost been poisoned the night before. The setting sun painted the sky blood red, and in the distance, she could see the lights of Willowbrook beginning to twinkle. But for the first time in months, Martha felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You won this battle, but the war is far from over. Watch your back, Martha. Callahan." Martha smiled grimly and typed back, "Bring it on. I'm just getting started." She'd leer. The explosion that destroyed Martha's barn came at 4:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. The blast wave shattered every window in her house and threw her from her bed onto the hardwood floor. Through the ringing in her ears, she could hear the screams of terrified cattle and the roar of flames consuming 3 generations of Callahan history. Martha stumbled to her feet, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead, and stared through the broken window at the inferno that had been her grandfather's barn. The structure he'd built with his own hands was now a pillar of fire reaching toward the stars. Her phone was ringing. She answered without looking at the caller ID. "Did you enjoy the fireworks, Martha?" The voice was electronically distorted, but the malice was unmistakable. "That's what happens to people who don't know when to quit. You bastards killed my animals. That was just a warning. Next time, it'll be your house with you in it." The line went dead. Martha stood in her ruined kitchen, surrounded by broken glass and debris, and felt something inside her snap. Not break, snap. Like a steel cable under too much tension, releasing all its stored energy at once. They'd crossed the line from legal warfare to terrorism. They'd murdered innocent animals and destroyed irreplaceable history. And they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. She called 911, then Sheriff Anderson directly, then Robert Chen. But even as she made the calls, Martha knew the legal system couldn't protect her anymore. These people had demonstrated they were willing to commit arson and animal cruelty to get what they wanted. Time to remind them that she came from a family that had survived the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, and the farm crisis. A family that had never backed down from a fight. The fire department arrived first, but the barn was already a total loss. Captain Rodriguez, a weathered veteran who'd known Martha's family for decades, shook his head as his crew worked to contain the blaze. "Accelerant," he said grimly. "Gasoline, maybe diesel fuel." "This wasn't an accident, Martha." "Oh no. Any idea who might have done this?" Martha looked toward Willowbrook, where the mansion lights twinkled like malevolent stars. "I've got a few ideas." Sheriff Anderson arrived as the last flames were being extinguished. His face was grim as he surveyed the destruction. "This is Escalation, Martha. Professional arson, intimidation calls, these people are playing for keeps now." "Good," Martha said quietly. "So am I." "What does that mean?" Martha met his eyes. "It means they just declared war on the wrong family. The sheriff studied her face for a long moment. "Martha, I need you to promise me you won't do anything stupid. Let the law handle this." "The law's been handling it for months, Sheriff. And look where that got me." As the emergency crews packed up their equipment, Martha walked through the smoking ruins of her barn. Most of her cattle had escaped, but 3 calves hadn't made it out in time. Their charred bodies lay among the twisted metal and collapsed timber, innocent victims of someone else's greed. She knelt beside the smallest calf, a heifer she'd bottle-fed from birth, and made a promise that would have terrified anyone who heard it. The next morning brought a parade of reporters, insurance investigators, and federal agents. Martha learned that the FBI was now involved, treating the arson as domestic terrorism connected to the larger property fraud investigation. Agent Sarah Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, interviewed Martha in the ruins of her kitchen. "Mrs. Callahan, we believe this attack is connected to your testimony in the HOA fraud case. You've become a target because you're the key witness who can bring down their entire operation. How many people are involved?" "We are tracking at least 50 individuals across 12 counties. State legislators, county commissioners, judges, developers. It's a massive conspiracy. And you're the one person who can tie it all together." Martha poured coffee from a pot she'd heated on her camping stove. "What do you need from me?" "We need you to testify before a federal grand jury next week." "But Mrs. Callahan, I have to warn you, the danger to you is very real. These people have killed before." "Killed?" 3 other witnesses in similar cases have died in the past 2 years. Car accidents, house fires, sudden heart attacks. All ruled accidental or natural, but the pattern is suspicious. Martha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "You're saying they're assassinating witnesses?" "I'm saying you need protection. We are prepared to offer you witness relocation if necessary." "No." Martha's voice was flat and final. "I'm not running from my home. This is Callahan land, and Callahans don't run." Agent Martinez leaned forward. "Mrs. Callahan, these people have resources you can't imagine. Private security firms, corrupt officials, unlimited funding. They can make you disappear. Let them try." That afternoon, Martha drove to the county courthouse to file for concealed carry permits, not just for herself, but for every weapon she owned. If they wanted to escalate to lethal force, she'd meet them on equal terms. But as she walked up the courthouse steps, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. A black sedan with tinted windows was parked across the street, and the same car had been behind her on the drive into town. They were already watching her. Inside the courthouse, Martha was approached by a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Jonathan Webb, senior partner at Webb, Morrison and Associates. "Mrs. Callahan, I represent certain interested parties who would like to resolve this situation amicably. I thought your client was under arrest. Mrs. Westbrook was released on bail yesterday. And she's prepared to make you an offer that could solve all your problems." Martha kept walking toward the permit office. "Not interested." $5 million, Mrs. Callahan. Cash. For your entire property, plus compensation for your recent losses. You could buy a ranch twice the size anywhere in Texas. Martha stopped walking and turned to face him. "Let me make this very clear. Mr. Webb. Your client tried to poison my cattle, burned down my barn, and killed my animals. There isn't enough money in the world to make this go away. Mrs. Callahan, you need to understand the position you're in. My clients have substantial resources and considerable influence. It would be unfortunate if you were to continue on your current path." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality check. Accidents happen to people who make themselves inconvenient. House fires, car crashes, sudden illnesses. It would be tragic if something happened to you before you could enjoy your retirement." Martha smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "Mr. Webb, let me give you a reality check. I'm a Texas rancher whose family has been fighting off thieves and murderers for 3 generations. Your clients just escalated this to war, and they are about to find out what that means." She turned and continued toward the permit office, leaving Webb standing in the hallway with his mouth open. But as Martha filled out her paperwork, she could feel eyes watching her from every corner. The conspiracy was vast, well-funded, and completely ruthless. They'd already demonstrated they were willing to commit arson and murder to protect their operation. The smart thing would be to take the money and run. The safe thing would be to accept witness protection and disappear. But Martha Callahan had never been accused of being smart or safe. That evening, she sat on her porch with a rifle across her knees, watching the sunset paint her damaged property in shades of blood and gold. Her phone rang constantly, reporters, investigators, lawyers, and anonymous callers delivering increasingly graphic death threats. But it was the call from Robert Chen that changed everything. "Martha, you need to know what we are up against. I've been digging into the people behind this conspiracy, and it goes higher than we thought." "How high?" "State Senator Blake Morrison is Patricia Westbrook's uncle. The county judge who approved the original land seizures is his golf partner. The district attorney who's been slow-walking the prosecutions went to law school with him. Political corruption. More than that. Morrison sits on the state land commission that oversees eminent domain laws. He's been writing the regulations that made these seizures possible." Martha felt the pieces clicking into place. This isn't just about stealing property. It's about changing the laws to make it legal. Exactly. And if they succeed here, they can roll it out statewide. Thousands of family farms and ranches could be seized for development in the public interest. The weight of it hit Martha like a physical blow. This wasn't just about her ranch anymore, it was about the future of rural America. If these people succeeded, they'd have created a legal framework for stealing any property they wanted. "Robert, what happens if I testify?" "You bring down the entire conspiracy." "But Martha, they know that. Which means they'll do anything to stop you." After hanging up, Martha sat in the gathering darkness and thought about her grandfather's stories. How he'd faced down railroad companies and cattle barons who thought they could take whatever they wanted. How he'd stood alone on this very porch with a rifle in his hands, defending his family's future against men who had more money and power than he could ever dream of. He'd won because he'd been willing to pay any price, make any sacrifice, to protect what mattered most. Now it was Martha's turn. She pulled out her phone and called Agent Martinez. "I'll testify," she said. "But I'm not going into hiding, and I'm not running. If they want me, they can come and get me." "Mrs. Callahan." "That's extremely." They came for Martha on Thursday night, 3 hours before her scheduled grand jury testimony. She was waiting for them. Martha sat in her grandfather's rocking chair on the darkened porch, night vision goggles around her neck and the Remington 870 across her lap. For 72 hours, she'd been watching vehicles cruise past her property at irregular intervals, different cars, different drivers, but all with the same predatory patience. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, just as her grandfather had predicted it would when he taught her tactical defense on this very porch 30 years ago. A black SUV crashed through her front gate while a panel van approached from the east pasture, and armed figures on foot moved through the oak grove where her grandmother was buried. Professional operators using military tactics, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated a Texas rancher fighting on her own land. Martha triggered the first surprise from her rocking chair, buried pressure plates that detonated homemade flashbang devices along the gravel driveway. The SUV swerved wildly as its driver was temporarily blinded, crashing into the oak tree where Martha had carved her initials as a child. The van fared worse. Martha had spent the past week mining her eastern approach with devices her nephew had taught her to make from fertilizer and diesel fuel. The explosion that swallowed the van lit up the night sky like the 4th of July, sending burning debris across 2 acres of pasture. But the foot team was the real threat. 8 men in tactical gear, armed with automatic weapons and moving with the precision of Special Forces veterans. The kind of operators who could make a rancher disappear without leaving evidence. Martha slipped off the porch and became a ghost in her own landscape. She'd spent 6 decades learning every stone, every tree, every fold in the ground of this property. Her attackers had night vision and superior firepower, but they were strangers in her domain. The first man died silently, throat cut with her grandfather's skinning knife as he paused to check his GPS coordinates. Martha dragged his body into the irrigation ditch and took his radio, listening to their tactical communications. Alpha Team, report status. Johnson's not responding. Possible equipment malfunction. Negative. Target is mobile and hostile. Switch to search and destroy. Martha smiled grimly. Search and destroy. They were about to learn why her grandfather had survived 3 land wars and died peacefully in his sleep. She moved through the shadows like a predator, using every trick. 3 generations of Callahans had learned about defending this ground. The second man fell to a booby trap, a modified bear snare that caught his ankle and triggered a 12-gauge shell aimed at chest height. The third man almost got her. He was better than the others, patient and professional, and Martha barely heard him coming through the tall grass near the creek. But her grandfather's voice whispered in her memory, when you can't see the enemy, make him come to you. Martha triggered another pressure plate, this one connected to a spotlight that illuminated a decoy she'd positioned in the open. The snipers. Muzzle flash gave away his position, and Martha's return shot from the Winchester took his head clean off. Alpha Leader, we have multiple casualties. This was supposed to be a simple termination. Adjust tactics. She's better than intelligence suggested. Martha keyed the dead man's radio. Intelligence was right about one thing, boys. I'm definitely going to terminate someone tonight. The remaining 5 operators began moving more cautiously, but caution was a luxury Martha wouldn't allow them. She had 90 minutes before Sheriff Anderson's morning patrol would discover the battle, and she needed to be finished before then. She triggered the second wave of defenses, motion-activated sprinkler systems she'd modified to spray diesel fuel instead of water, followed by incendiary rounds that turned sections of her pasture into walls of flame. The operators found themselves trapped in a maze of fire, forced to move where Martha wanted them to go. Into her grandfather's final lesson, sometimes the best defense is making your enemy think they are winning. Martha allowed herself to be seen running toward the ruined barn, apparently panicked and making tactical mistakes. The remaining operators converged on her position, moving fast and confident. They walked directly into the killing ground she'd prepared. The barn's foundation was honeycombed with tunnels her grandfather had dug during the Cold War, escape routes and weapons caches that had never been needed until tonight. Martha disappeared into the underground network just as the operators reached the barn. The final surprise was buried in the barn's debris, 50 pounds of tannerite explosive connected to a tripwire. When the lead operator kicked aside a piece of charred timber searching for Martha's body, the explosion turned the barn's remains into a crater and took 3 men with it. The last 2 operators broke and ran. Martha let them go. She'd made her point. As sirens wailed in the distance and helicopters thundered overhead, Martha climbed out of her tunnel and surveyed the battlefield. 6 dead professional killers. 2 vehicles destroyed, and her property looking like a war zone. But she was alive, and in 4 hours she would testify before the federal grand jury. Sheriff Anderson arrived first, taking in the carnage with the weary expression of a man who'd seen too much violence in his career. Martha, what the hell happened here? Home invasion, Sheriff. Multiple armed intruders attempted to murder me in my sleep. I defended myself. Defended yourself? It looks like Normandy Beach out here. Agent Martinez arrived with a full FBI tactical team, but the real surprise was the woman who climbed out of the lead vehicle, Deputy Director Sarah Chen, Robert's sister and one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in Texas. Mrs. Callahan, she said, studying the destruction, we monitored radio chatter about a planned hit on our star witness. When we couldn't reach you, we feared the worst. As you can see, their fears were better founded than yours. Deputy Director Chen walked to the crater where the barn had stood, then to the burning remains of the van. How many attackers? 8 that I counted. Professional operators, military training. They knew the layout of my property and came prepared for a quick assassination. And you killed 6 of them. I defended my home against terrorists who were trying to murder me before I could testify. In Texas, that's not just legal, it's patriotic. Agent Martinez was examining one of the bodies. These men are carrying military-grade equipment and false identification. This was a professional hit, ordered by someone with serious resources. Resources we are about to trace, Deputy Director Chen said grimly. Mrs. Callahan, this attack proves how dangerous your testimony is to the conspiracy. Are you prepared to proceed? Martha looked around at the battlefield that had been her family's peaceful ranch just hours before. At the crater where her grandfather's barn had stood. At the burning remains of vehicles that had carried men sent to murder her. Deputy Director, I've spent the last year watching corrupt officials and wealthy criminals try to steal my family's land. Tonight they escalated to attempted murder. Yes, I'm prepared to testify. In fact, I'm looking forward to it. The grand jury convenes in 3 hours. We'll provide maximum security. That won't be necessary. I think I've demonstrated that I can handle myself. But as Martha prepared to leave for the courthouse, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Robert Chen's number, but the voice that answered was electronically distorted. Very impressive, Mrs. Callahan. You've proven to be more resourceful than we anticipated. Who is this? Let's just say I represent interests that go far beyond Patricia Westbrook and her little HOA scheme. You've stumbled into something much larger than land fraud. Then you know that I'm not backing down. Oh, we are counting on that. You see, Mrs. Callahan, your testimony is going to expose one conspiracy while concealing another. Patricia Westbrook and her associates are expendable, small players in a much bigger game. Martha felt ice forming in her stomach. What game? The same game that's been played for centuries. Those with power taking from those without. The HOA land seizures were just the pilot program. Once we perfect the legal framework in Texas, we'll roll it out nationwide. Millions of acres of family farms and ranches seized for development in the public interest. The grand jury will stop you. The grand jury will stop Patricia Westbrook's operation. They'll never know about ours. By the time they realize what we've accomplished, half the agricultural land in America will be in corporate hands. I'll expose all of it. With what evidence? Mrs. Callahan, you're about to testify against a small-time HOA president and her local accomplices. You have no evidence of the larger conspiracy because we made sure you'd never find it. The caller laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking. Congratulations on your victory, Mrs. Callahan. You've won the battle while helping us win the war. The line went dead. Martha stood in the wreckage of her property, holding a silent phone, as the full magnitude of her situation crashed down on her. She'd fought so hard to expose the truth that she'd missed the larger lie. The conspiracy she was about to destroy was just a front for something infinitely worse. But as she looked at the crater where 6 professional killers had tried to murder her, Martha felt something she hadn't expected. She felt grateful. They'd shown her their hand. They'd revealed